Drawing this cute Fennec is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hey, hello wonderful people! It's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos, and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools, and let's get started. As usual, the first thing we're going to do here is just create a new canvas so that we have somewhere to draw. Now for reference, these are the dimensions of the canvas I will be using in this demo. It is just the size of my iPad screen because again, it's a demo, but make sure you find dimensions that work for your own project requirements. Now if you're not exactly sure how to pick a canvas size, I have a video in which I teach you everything you need to know in order to make a decision, so I will link that in the description below. And if you're wondering how to get the little reference image here at the top, all you have to do is go in the wrench icon menu at the top right here. And then in the canvas submenu, you're going to have the option to activate the reference toggle here, which is then going to let you import an image. So if you want to use my illustration as a reference, it's going to be linked in the description below for you to download, and it's going to come with the color palette that we're going to use in this video. Now don't worry, you don't have to download the color palette. If you want to just practice color picking your own colors, that's even better because yeah, that's just good practice. And I'm also going to give you tips on how to create your own color palette. So it's really not essential, but if you do want to have the exact same colors I will be using, you can download my palette below. Okay, now with that said, we're going to start with just a super rough sketch of the Fennec, and we're going to break it down in basic shapes. So go ahead and create a new layer and rename this layer to Sketch. Now we're not going to see the sketch in the final result, so you can really use any color of your choice. I like sketching with just a neutral gray, a little bit like this. And in this video, I'm always going to be suggesting two different kind of brushes. One is going to be a free brush that comes with Procreate and is going to allow you to follow along just fine. There's really no worries here. And the other brushes are going to be brushes from my Ultimate Illustration bundle. Now again, they are not essential, but they can help you save some time and get more professional results just because of the texture that comes with them. That being said, again, you really don't need to buy anything. You can follow along with the basic brushes. It's going to be the same technique and the same steps. Especially for the sketch, we really don't need a fancy brush again because we're not going to see it in the final result. So just pick a brush that you know you're comfortable with. That could be, for example, in the sketching panel, so the brushes that come with Procreate, the HB pencil. Or if you have the illustration bundle, you could pick, of course, the sketching brush. So like I was saying, we're just going to break down our little friend here in basic shapes, and we're going to use these basic shapes later to create a neater sketch. But for now, we just want to, break it down to have the main structure or the skeleton, no matter how you want to call it. So we're going to start that with just a kind of oval for the head. So a little bit flatter and a bit longer than, a real circle. Once you have that, we're going to go ahead and draw two circles for the body. They're going to be slightly smaller than the head, and they're going to be kind of angled that way. So you can see here a little guy, it's kind of like he's running or jumping or something like that. So the back of his body is higher than the front, so we're just going to draw the two circles in this kind of upward angle like this. And for the legs, you can really have any kind of orientation or placement as you want. If you want to do the same as me, we're going to start with this front leg right here. So we're just going to draw a little oval to map out the thickness and the length of the leg, and then a little kind of circle at the front to draw the paw. Then we're going to simply draw the other legs with just variations of this oval, so roughly the same length and same thickness, just in different angles and with some bend in them. Personally, I just like to go with very kind of curvy shapes instead of having clear articulations in them. So it's just kind of the front leg is this bean shape here with, again, the little paw. And for the back legs, you can actually kind of break them down in two parts. So you have the hips or the thighs, and then a little blob, kind of a bean shape for, the feet and the bottom part of the leg. You can just draw the second one right here, which is going to be hidden. And then all you have to do is connect the two different parts of the body. So the belly is going to be fairly thin, and then the butt is going to connect with the head to create the back like this. And right now, if you're not super happy with the proportions of everything, don't worry about it. That's the beauty of drawing with basic shapes. I'm going to show you, once we're done just mapping out everything, how you can move stuff around really quickly. But for now, we're going to focus on the face. So just zooming in a little bit, and then refining the shape of the head. So you could have any kind of shape you want here. You could stick with some sort of an oval, or you could, like me, extend the cheeks a little bit to make them pointier. And then adding a slightly curved vertical line and a slightly curved horizontal line to help you show the direction of the head, and then be able to quickly place the different facial features. So for the nose area, all you have to do is start from the intersection of your vertical and horizontal line, and then draw a slightly curved line a little bit like this. And then extend it into another curved line like this. Now this shape can obviously, vary. You don't have to have exactly that. It could be thinner or bigger, however you want it. And you can also add a little bit of a, corner of the mouth like this right here, and then draw a nose at the very top. The eyes here, I'm having them closed so my little Fennec look like he's really happy and just running around. So just tiny little curved line like this. But you could have them open if you want, so you would just draw ovals or very big eyes. You can really experiment here and customize, but I'm gonna have them closed. Now to make it really look like a Fennec, the most important part is to have outrageously big ears. So here there's really no limit to how big they can be, but make sure they're quite pointy as well. So I'm gonna have mine be very, very massive. We're also going to have a big fluffy tail. So I like to have my fluffy tail be this kind of inverted S shape. Super simple, but it looks full of movement, full of light, and very, very cute. So that's what I'm gonna do. And you can also kind of roughly map out the ground here just to help you see how everything is playing together. You can also quickly add here a little line for the top or the front of the body, like the neck/belly area, just to help you see that better. And that's really it for the structure. And now, like I was telling you, the beauty of drawing with basic shapes like this and creating a structure for your character is that once you've roughly mapped out everything, it's super easy to go ahead and change the proportions. For example, here, it almost looks like a sausage dog because my body is really, really long. Well, if that's the case for you, or if any other part is not how you want it to be, all you have to do is use the selection tool here at the top, setting it to freehand, and then drawing a selection around the body part that you're not super happy with. So in my case, I'm going to draw a selection around the back of the body. And then with the arrow tool, you can just move it and reposition it where you want it to be. You could also, if you want, set the arrow tool to uniform to resize the body part, or setting it to distort to not only resize, but also, kind of squish it or distort it. So you can easily play with your base shapes until you're happy with the structure of your character. And you can do that with literally every single base shape if you feel like the need to. But essentially here, all you're going to do is, make a structure of your character. It's okay if it looks crazy, that's fine. For now, we just want to have a kind of a basic skeleton that we can work with for the next step. Great, so once you have a very rough sketch like this and you're happy with the general proportions, go ahead and use the arrow tool, this time making sure it is set to uniform, and both resize and reposition your character so that it's exactly where you want it to be in the artwork. Once that is done, you're going to click on this little button here at the bottom to flip your sketch horizontally, and that's going to help you see if there's any mistake or anything that doesn't look quite good. So with that done, we're going to go ahead and refine our sketch and do a clean sketch before moving on to the color. Now you could draw your clean sketch on this sketch layer with just a darker color. I personally like to create a brand new layer, rename this new layer to clean sketch, and lower the opacity of my base rough sketch layer until I can just barely see it. Then all you have to do is stick with the same color, same brush, and just go ahead and pick which lines you want to use out of all the crazy messy lines that we've drawn in the rough sketch. And I call this clean sketch, but honestly, it doesn't need to be perfect either. It's just a good intermediate sketch when you're working on more complex illustrations, just to make sure that before you start adding the colors and all the shading, you really take the time to figure out what you want your illustration to be. So you could honestly, at this stage, if you want and if you feel comfortable, move on to the next chapter of this video, which is going to be the colors. But I recommend, taking maybe 2 minutes to just do this clean sketch, because it might help you save a lot of time in the long run if you don't have to change your colors and your shading later. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and leave a comment with the word desert. I know if you're new on the channel, you might be like, what's the deal with the secret password? What is that all about? Well, it's kind of a game that we play here on the channel, and in every single video I hide a secret password for you guys to find, and people seem to really like it, but it does a few really important things for the channel. It gives me a lot of insight on how to edit and place my videos better, which helps me to create, better tutorials for you guys, so that's really, really important. And it's also really cool because you guys know me, you see my face in the intro, you hear my voice throughout the entire video, but I have no idea who you guys are. And whenever you leave a comment, no matter what the comment is, I get to sometimes see your face, sometimes your name, and it's just really cool to see who's part of the creative community that we're building here on this channel. So just leave a comment with the word desert, and then we're going to keep going. So once you're happy with your clean sketch, you have a couple options before moving on to the color. You could go ahead and hide the base sketch if you want. I personally really like to keep it because I feel like it's easier, it kind of shows the form of everything and it helps for shading. So I personally like to keep it, but I merge the two layers together. And the way to do that is just to take 2 fingers and then squish the layers quite literally. So you can do that and then go back to the arrow tool to flip your sketch back to the original orientation it was in. Before we start adding the colors, it might be helpful to go back to your layer panel and change the blending mode of your sketch layer to multiply. Now, I have a full video in which I teach you everything you need to know about blending mode, so we're not going to go into all the details here, but essentially what it does is now your sketch, no matter what color is behind it, your sketch is going to look different from it. So even if it's on a dark color or a light color, you're going to be able to see your sketch well. So that's really, really helpful. And we're also going to lower the opacity of our sketch so it's not too much in the way and we don't confuse it with the rest of the illustration. So once you have that, go ahead and create a new layer, put it below the sketch and rename it to, if I can do it, color. So on this color layer, all we're going to do is draw a silhouette of our Fennec fox. So just one solid color. And for that, honestly, you can pick any kind of like sandy color, kind of a beige, but a bit more orange. And in terms of brushes here, you have a few options. You could go in the airbrushing panel. So again, the brushes that come with Procreate, and pick the hard brush, making sure that you bring the opacity back up to 100% if you watch my watercolor videos. Otherwise, if you have the illustration bundle, go ahead and pick the basic round brush. Well, base round brush. And here, again, super simple. All you're going to do is outline your entire Fennec so that you can then fill it in and create a silhouette. So it's quite simple, but you want to make sure that you take the time to do it right, because if your silhouette doesn't look super good, or if you're not happy with your silhouette, then it's going to be very hard to be happy with the final result of the illustration. And one advice I have for that is to try and draw your lines in one stroke. And what I mean by that is I'll give you an example. So instead of drawing, for example, the bottom of the nose area right here, and then realizing, I'm not happy with this curve, going back, erasing only that section, and then trying to redraw that section. Don't do that. Instead of erasing, just draw until you're happy with it. And if you're not happy with it, undo and redraw. That way you're going to get curves and essentially a silhouette that flows instead of being kind of broken in multiple little, not super coherent lines. So that's one reason you want to do it. But also over time is going to save you some time to just undo and redo instead of erasing. Believe it or not, I know when you first start to do that and try to not use your eraser, it's a bit difficult and it tends to be a little bit more time consuming. But over time it's going to be much quicker, believe me. So I'm going to stop talking here to let you focus on drawing your outline, and we're going to meet once we have a fully done outline to fill it in together and then keep moving on with the color. Awesome! So once you've outlined the entire silhouette, all you have to do is go ahead and drag your color onto it. And you might need to adjust your threshold. So you're going to move your pencil before lifting it from left to right until you find the moment right before it fills in the entire canvas like this. So just finding right before and then lifting up your pencil, so you're going to have a solid silhouette. And one thing I do want to mention is that seeing a silhouette like this is quite different than just seeing a sketch. So once you have your silhouette, don't hesitate to rework certain areas and move stuff around again, because yeah, for example here I can see my leg is just kind of, that front leg doesn't belong there. So you can also use your arrow tool or selection tool, here to select a part of your Fennec, and then with the arrow tool move it as needed and refining your silhouette until you're super happy with it. So once we have our silhouette, we're going to add the other color areas of the Fennec, because it's kind of not just this sandy color, there's a cream and then a darker brown. And for that, we're going to create a new layer that we're going to rename to Extra Colors. Now we're going to apply this extra color layer as a clipping mask. So just tap on it and then in the layer menu, select clipping mask. Now what a there we go. Now what a clipping mask does is everything we draw on this extra color layer is now going to stay within the base silhouette that we've created. So we don't have to worry about staying within the lines. But the beauty of drawing on a separate layer instead of on the base layer is that we have a bit more control if we make a mistake on the extra color, or we color a part that we don't want to color. We can quickly just erase that without erasing the silhouette that we worked on really hard. So we're going to start with just the cream, so the light beige. So all you have to do is go from your base and make it quite a bit lighter, but not quite white, because we want to be able to add some lights later. So if it's already white, we're not going to be able to do that. So almost white, but not quite. If you're using the color palette, it's going to be this one right here. And in terms of brushes here, depending on the vibe that you want in your piece, you could go with a super soft brush, like in the airbrushing panel that comes with Procreate, the soft brush. Or if you want something a little bit more textured, which is what I'm going to go for, you can go in the sketching panel, picking the 6B pencil and making it quite big. If you have the illustration bundle, you can go ahead and pick the basic texture brush. This is the one I'm going to be using, and it's really great for adding large texture sections that look a little bit like pencil. So in terms of the cream section on the Fennec Fox, you can notice that there's a few of them. The first one, and probably the easiest one to draw, being the bottom of the legs and the feet. So if you're drawing with an Apple pencil, to quickly color a larger section, all you have to do is, instead of drawing with your pencil being upright like this, which creates very clear, defined lines, tilting your pencil and then brushing just like you would do with a regular, real life pencil, and that's going to color a larger area. If you don't have an Apple pencil or you're drawing with your finger or something like that, you're just going to make your brush quite big. But otherwise, with this tool, you can quickly color a very large area. So we're going to start again with the bottom of the feet, pretty much up to kind of the top of the thighs like this, as well as the inner thigh for this hind leg, really quickly like this. Doing the same in the front, so bottom of the feet up to pretty much the middle of the leg here. And then this kind of neck to belly area, very soft once more. And it's okay, if it's not perfect, that's totally fine. We're building texture, we're building character, so it doesn't need to be super, super clean. Now, most of the face of the Fennec is also going to have that texture. The other areas are going to be the darker brown, so for now you can just color the entire head and ears in this cream color that we're using right now. For the connection of the ear and the tail, you do want to make sure it's pretty clean though, because it's two different body parts. So for that, you're going to lift up your pencil and make it so that you're drawing clean strokes. And if you're drawing with a brush that is super big, you might want to lower the size of it. So once you have your cream color, we're going to move on to more of a burnt caramel for some of the sections. So still going back to your base color that you use for the Fennec, so it could be in your history, in the color palette, or you could just color pick it by holding your finger on it. you're this time going to make it darker and more saturated. So again, same base color, just slightly darker and more saturated. If you're using the color palette, it's going to be this one right here. Now for this color, we're going to brush over the top of the butt really quickly, very soft. So something a little bit like this. We're also going to brush kind of the top, oops, sorry about that, the top of the tail. And maybe kind of bringing it down on the rest of the tail a little bit. Nothing too intense. And you can see that I'm really not being precise, so you don't need to be precise either. We're also going to draw this little kind of section, I'm not sure how to describe it, but between the eyes and the nose, I guess. And this one you want to make sure that you do it right. So I would say, I just said 2 seconds ago, you don't need to be precise. This section is the one that you want to be precise because it's really a kind of traditional marking on Fennec. Just like raccoons have their own marking around the eyes, this is the marking on Fennec. So you want to make sure that you do it right. And you can also use this color if you have eyebrows like I do, so just coloring in your eyebrows. And then we're going to color the top of the head, leaving a little bit of a gap in the very middle of it. So you're going to have two sections like this that are going to go down probably around the eyebrow area. And you're going to color the top of the ear. So not the inside, really the top external part. And this one as well, you do want to make sure that you have a clean distinction between the outside and the outside. Great, so once we have the basic colors on the Fennec, we can move on to drawing the outlines and the details. So for that, just go ahead and create a new layer above everything. It could be below the sketch, honestly, it doesn't matter, but make sure it's above the colors, obviously. And rename this one to Details. And you have a few options when you're drawing the details. You could have outlines that are pure black, like in comics book, for example. I like to have outlines that are just a darker version of my base color. So in that case, you could pick or stick with the kind of caramelly brown that we have right now and make it even darker. Or again, like I was saying, you could use black, or you could use, if you have the color palette, this brown right here, which is essentially, yeah, the caramel brown, but just darker. And in terms of brushes, you have a few options once more. If you want really smooth, clean outlines, you could go ahead and in the inking panel, if I can find it, where is it? There we go, right under the sketching. You could use the studio pen, so that's going to give you these clean line art kind of lines, so the cartoonish vibe. If you want textured outlines, which work really well with what we've been doing so far, you could stick with the sketching panel, but this time using the 6B pencil. And if you have the illustration bundle, you can pick, of course, the outlines brush. So here, pretty simple once more. It's not a complicated step, but it's one step that you need to take the time to do it right because it makes a big difference. So all you have to do is go ahead and draw, well, the outlines and the details on your character. Now here, since we're drawing an animal that has fur, I personally like to have my outlines be kind of very rough. So the curve of them and the positioning of them is cleaner than a sketch, but there are some stray lines that go outside and show this idea of fur. So we can tell that the Fennec is not made of plastic, it actually has, you know, hair. So I'm going to stop talking to let you focus on drawing your outlines and really just focus on the outlines right now. You don't have to do the facial features. We're going to do that together in the next step. And I'm going to keep my video rolling in the background even if I'm not talking, so you can use it as a reference as needed. So once you have your outlines, you might actually want to go ahead and draw the facial features on a separate layer so you can move them around if you need. It's obviously not essential, but that's personally something I like to do. So just creating a new layer and renaming this to, I don't know, eyes and nose. And for the eyes and nose, I'm going to go with a very, very dark brown just so that they can be seen very, very clearly. So same brown, but just much darker, and the color palette is going to be this one right here. Same thing, same brush, you're just going to draw the facial features. And if you want to make your nose a little bit more interesting, you can also go ahead and pick a very, very bright color. I'm going to go back with kind of the cream color that we use for the body, but you could go with pure white for this, honestly. And you can draw a little bit of a highlight right here. And the beauty of drawing the facial features on a separate layer is that you can always go back and use the trusty selection tool to move something around, like for example this eye with the arrow tool and repositioning it as needed, because the facial features are so important and the exact placement of them really matters, so having them separate can really help you just move them around as you keep building your illustration. And at this stage, we're ready to start shading. So for that, we're going to hide our sketch layer just so it's not in the way anymore. And we're going to create a new layer that we're going to put this time below the details, but above the extra color. And we're going to rename this one to Shadows. Wow, whatever that was. And we're also going to apply it as a clipping mask. Now for the shadows, we're going to use a blending mode called Linear Burn. And once more, I'm not going to go into all the details about it, but essentially it's going to help us pick one color and it's going to make this color darker over the base colors, creating shadows. And for now, we're going to lower the opacity of this layer as well, around 50%. Personally, I like to use for my shadow a color that is kind of a grayish purple, kind of like this. But you could use really any tint of your choice. Just make sure that you're not working with a neutral gray, because then your shadows would be really, really muddy. So just any color other than gray will work well. But again, I'm gonna go with a grayish purple like this. And we're going to go back to the brush that we used to add the other colors. So it could be a soft brush if you're working with the free Procreate options, or the 6B pencil. If you are working with the illustration bundle, you're going to go back to your basic texture brush. And if you're new to shading, I know it might be a little bit intimidating, so if that's the case for you, if you're just a bit confused with placing your shadow, it is always a good idea to just create a new layer. You don't need to rename it because it's just a scrap layer, making sure that it's not a clipping mask. And drawing your light source. So let's say I want my light source to be here, so kind of on the top left. And then drawing a bunch of little lines to show essentially, the rays of light. That way you can simply go back on your shadow layer and then from your light source following the rays until they hit a part of your character. For example, if I follow this right here, it hits the head, and then we're like, okay, it's the head, so there's going to be a shadow under the head. So you can just, paint that shadow real quickly. So these shadows are what is called cast shadows, because it's a body part casting a shadow on a different body part. So you can just very quickly start with those. So just following your rays until they hit something, and then drawing a shadow, below that object. So you're going to have one for sure below the head, one on the legs that are further away, one in the inner of the ears, because if you think about it, it's kind of folded, so there's no way the light is getting in there. So something a little bit like this, which is pretty good, but our character still looks flat, and the reason for that is there are multiple types of shadow. There's not just cast shadow, there's also something called form shadows. So if you look at, for example, what would be easy? Well, let's look at the head here. The head right now, it looks pretty flat, but in reality, it would be curving away like this, which means at one point, the light wouldn't be able to hit the surface because the surface is curving away. So there's not an object casting a shadow on the side of the head, it's just that it's curving away, so the light is not able to reach it. So for form shadows, what you do is just draw shadows on the opposite sides of your light source. So in my case, my light source is on the top left, which means the bottom right of my character is going to be covered in shadows, but these shadows are much softer than cast shadows. So you just essentially create kind of gradients like this. Now, don't worry about making them perfect gradients. You can just quickly map them out for now, and then we're going to blend them in so they look really nice. Great, so you can quickly double check everything by hiding your light source just to make sure that you didn't forget anything. And if you need to blend any of your form shadows, you could use the smudge tool right here at the top, so the little finger icon, and setting your brush to, in the painting panel, the stucco brush if you do want to have texture. Otherwise, if you want everything to be smooth, you can use in the airbrushing panel the soft brush. I personally really like the stucco brush. I think it works well with the kind of pencil brush that we've been working with. So all you have to do at this stage is go back and blend any form shadow that is not soft enough for your liking. But make sure that you keep your cast shadow really crisp and nice. We're also going to add some highlights, so for that go ahead and create a new layer above the shadows and apply it as a clipping mask as well so it stays within our base shape. And you're going to rename this one to lights. And we're going to use the blending mode add for the lights. Now add is very strong, so for now we're going to lower it quite a lot, probably around 20%. But once we have our lights and shadows painted, we're going to go back and play with the opacity of both those layers, so it doesn't really matter for now. And for the lights, since we're painting a character that is going to be outside in the sun, we're going to pick a super nice, bright, yellow-orange color. Honestly, it's pretty similar to the cream color we use on the Fennec, so just pick something bright and yellow. Honestly, it doesn't need to be super precise. And we're going to go back to a slightly more precise brush. So if you're working with the free brushes, that could mean in the sketching panel, the 6B pencil, or if you're working with the illustration bundle, the outlines brush. Now what are you going to do here? Well, the technique I like to do, which is what I called myself the outlining your outline technique, is all the outlines, or all the body parts I should say, that are facing towards the light source, which in my case, if we remember, was somewhere around here. You're going to go ahead and just outline those shapes. So outlining your outline. It's really simple because you don't have to worry about the volume of your character. You don't have to worry about the 3D aspect of it. But it really makes it pop, especially when we're going to add the background later, just drawing these highlights like this. So super simple, but really cool result. That being said, if there is another highlighting technique that you want to use, feel free to go ahead and do that at this stage. And you can also add highlights just in parts that you want to accentuate, like the eyes here. I want to make sure that they really pop, so I'm gonna add a highlight there, although it doesn't really make sense. We're drawing something cartoonish. It doesn't need to make perfect sense. As long as you think it looks good, honestly, that's pretty much all that matters. Speaking of not really making sense, I like to also add 2 little highlights on the cheeks. No reason, I just think it's cute, so you might want to do the same if you feel like it. So once you've painted your lights and your shadows, like I was saying, you can go back and play with the opacity of those layers until you get something that you're happy with. That is really a question of a personal preference. There's not a right or wrong opacity here. It's just how much contrast you want in your piece. I think I'm gonna go with quite a lot of contrast actually. Yeah, that's nice. And the last thing we can do before moving to the background, that's totally optional, but I personally like to have some little speckles on my character. So if you want some as well, just create a new layer, apply it, or sorry, rename it to speckles, apply it as a clipping mask so it stays within your base shape color, and you can use the blending mode add for this as well. Again, lowering the opacity quite a lot, probably around 20%, 25% for this. And in terms of brushes here, if you're using the free brushes, you're going to go in the elements panel, I think. Yep, and picking the Driven Snow brush. Now I know it sounds weird, but trust me. Or if you're working with the illustration bundle, you're going to pick the Freckles brush, which I know also sounds weird, but trust me once more. And you're going to just paint some speckles on the areas that are in the light as well. So you can see it's very tiny detail, but it just adds to the texture and make the piece feel more interesting. And it just takes, what, 10 seconds maybe? So it's a little step that you can always do when you feel like there's something missing. Adding a few dots here and there, you know, it does the trick for me at least. Great, so at this stage we're ready to move on to the background, which is going to be simple. Honestly, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here. And we're going to start by just cleaning our layers a little bit. So at this stage you could go ahead and delete your sketch layer and delete your light source layer, and then group all of the other layers that we have left together. So to do that, you just swipe them towards the right with one finger till you have all of them selected, And then you're going to click on the group option. You're going to be able to collapse the group by clicking on the little like arrow here, and then rename the group to Fennec. That way your file is just going to be much more organized, and it's just going to be easier for the next few steps. So we're going to simply start by changing the background color here to a nice blue. So you have a few ways to do that. You can just go ahead and, color pick a blue and say, I want this one. If you have the color palette, you could just pick this one right here, so the darker of the two options. But if you're trying to build your own palette, what you can do to make sure that your blue works well with the Fennec color is just color pick one of the color of the body, the main one that you think represents the whole piece the best. And then at the bottom of your color panel, selecting the harmony option right here. And if you set it to complementary, you're going to have a blue suggested to you, so you can just select this blue. And it's going to work well with the rest of your piece. So that's one option, but to be coherent with my color palette, I'm going to pick the one from the color palette, but you get the point. So once you have your background color, or your sky color, I should say, set as your background, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer and put it below the Fennec layer. And we're going to rename this one to background. And we're going to go with more of a painterly style for the background, so we're going to paint everything on the same layer. Now we're going to use almost the exact same color we used for the Fennec, so you could pick it in the color palette, or color pick it on your Fennec, but we're going to make it less saturated, so a little bit more gray. Now if you're working with the color palette, you're going to pick it is right here. And we're going to start by mapping out just the horizon, so nothing too complicated. And for that, you have a few options for brushes. Again, if you don't want to use texture, if you want something super flat and smooth, you're going to go either in the airbrushing panel, picking the hard brush, there we go. Or if you have the illustration bundle and want no texture, you're going to pick the base run brush. If you want to be working with texture and you are working with free brushes, you're going to go in the sketching panel and pick the 6B pencil. Or if you're working with the illustration bundle, you're going to pick the outline brush. So a few options here. I'm going to go with the outline brush because I do want to have texture. And yeah, just mapping out where you want the horizon to be. Try a few times until you have something you're happy with. And then you're going to fill in your shape. And if you're working with a brush that has some texture, you're going to probably need to adjust the threshold, so just moving your pencil again from left to right until the entire shape fills in, but doesn't fill in the entire canvas. But we can add some shapes in the background if you want to have kind of mountains or rocky areas, so you can really just very, very quickly map out some mountains, filling them in as you go, just to have a bit more of an interesting environment. But again, they really don't need to be precise. The main focal point is our little character here, so the background doesn't need to be anything super clean at all. So once we have the horizon, we might actually want to go ahead and add a bit of a gradient within this base color to make it look like it's not just one solid color, but it's actually something that has a lot of depth and perspective. So for that, we're going to activate Alpha Lock on the background layer. And to do that, you just use 2 fingers and swipe your layer towards the right with those 2 fingers, which as you're going to see is going to add this little checkered pattern in the background. You can also manually activate Alpha Lock by tapping on a layer and then activating it from the menu right here. Now everything we draw on this background layer is going to stay within the base shape we have, so we can quickly just add gradients, rock, and details. It's going to take just a few minutes, but it's going to be, just more interesting than having our fox on nothing. So we're going to start by picking a slightly lighter version of our sand color. So base sand color, just lighter. And we are going to draw kind of a second horizon, I guess. It's not a second horizon, but just a line slightly lower than our little mountains here. And then we're going to bring in this line and kind of creating a gradient. It really doesn't need to be perfect, just map it out. We're going to blend it later. And we're going to do the opposite, so a darker color starting from the bottom towards the top. If you're using the color palette, it's going to be this one right here. Otherwise, you just pick your base color, your base sand color, and make it darker. And this time you might want to focus on kind of the bottom corners instead of just the entire bottom. So something a little bit like this. You can see it takes a few seconds, but already we have something going on. And we're going to go back to our smudge tool. Once more, if you want to have something super soft without texture, you're going to use in the airbrushing panel the soft brush. Otherwise, in the painting panel, the stucco brush is going to be personally what I'm going to go with. And we're going to experiment with the sides here and just blend those different sections to create more of a smooth gradient. And when I say smooth, I'm not saying it needs to be perfect. It's totally okay to have different sections or different areas that blend differently. That's part of the idea, but a bit smoother than the crazy lines that we just had in the previous step. Awesome, so we can already see much more depth, much more perspective in our background, so that's great. We're going to then move on to adding a little bit of a shadow so that our fox is standing on something and not just floating in the middle of nothing. So for that shadow, you could use a very, very dark version of your sand color. I'm gonna go with this chocolate brown right here and just paint very quickly kind of a line below your character. That's much better already. I don't know about you, but I prefer this so much more. Now, while you're working with this brown, you might actually want to go ahead and draw some rocks in the foreground. So same thing as you did with the mountains, honestly, same kind of shapes, but this time in the foreground for rocks. And you can see I'm being very, very quick, so there's no need to be super precise here. Again, we're working on the background, we just want to have something going on, but we don't need to agonize over making it perfect. And since we're working on just one layer, you won't be able to use color drop because then it's going to recolor the entire layer. So you're going to have to fill in your shapes manually, but that just takes a few seconds. If you want, you can add a bit of a light effect on those rocks in the foreground. So you're just going to pick a lighter version of the rock, or the rock color I should say, so a lighter brown. And you can see, I mean, you can really just play, these are the colors we're using for the background. So you can just kind of play around with them, but there's just variations of the same sandy color. So darker, lighter, less saturated, more saturated. But the rule of thumb is the closer you are to the front, the more saturated and the darker the color is going to be. And the further it is in the back, the lighter and the less saturated it is going to be. So if you're working with your own colors, just pick one scent color and then have those variations going in and you're golden, seriously. It's not more complicated than that. So you can just draw basic little textured lights on your rock just so they're not one solid shape. And once more here, it's really not about perfection, it's just about showing the idea, showing what you have in mind, but without having that take away from the focus of the piece, which is our little character right here. So you can see if we zoom in these shapes, they look crazy, they don't look good. But if we zoom out and look at the entire thing, they bring something to the piece, they bring more texture, and they're good enough. Now with that same light brown, so the lighter part of these front rocks, you can go ahead and draw some more rocks in the rest of the desert. Same thing, just basic simple shapes, nothing precise, nothing crazy here, just to add interest. And obviously the further away they are, the smaller in general the rock should be. Although you could have some mountains as well, which would be bigger, but if you're drawing small rock shapes, make sure that they get smaller and smaller. And if you're drawing more massive formations, then those can be big, obviously. And the last little thing we have to do is add some variation within the rocks, so just a slightly different version again of your base color. I'm gonna go with this one right here. So pretty light, but quite desaturated. And you just can paint over some of the rocks, just so they're not all exactly the same color. Oh, and I almost forgot, if you want to add some clouds in the background, I recommend doing that on a separate layer just so that, you know, the mountains can hide the clouds. So just a new layer below the background, renaming this one to clouds. And then you can pick a lighter version of your sky color. So just either color picking it and then making it lighter, or if you're using the color palette, it's this one right here. And then you can just draw, honestly, just kind of, you know, sections, very long, in the background or in the sky. Nothing precise once more, just big shapes, but it does make the sky feel a little bit less flat and uniform. So if you enjoyed this video and want to learn how to create more cute illustrations just like this one, I highly recommend you check out this playlist in which I'm going to teach you exactly that. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos I post every Tuesday and Saturday. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.